What is going on, everybody? What is up? Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're about to get into this real soon. I'm just gonna wait for some people to come in and then we'll get started. But this is Let's Talk with Coach Stone, and super excited to be doing this for another day. So welcome everybody. Vision 2020, welcome. Holy Raw, welcome. Welcome everybody. Come on in, come on in. We're about to get into some good stuff. Our special guest will be here in a minute, and then we'll get started. Holy Raw, what's going on? Cocktales with LA, here she is. She's in the place. Darlene, what's going on? All right, so we are going to tag in our special guest, LA. Let me bring her on here. Oops. Let's go. Here we go. Need some water. I gotta start drinking more water, that's for sure. What's up? I can't hear you. No, I couldn't hear. You wanna come out and come back in? I got you now. Yeah. What's up? What's going on?
I'm learning so much. I'm learning so much about technology. COVID has upped my game.
Listen, COVID is up everybody's game. I'm talking to senior citizens whose game's been up, up from this. So it ain't just us.
Right? It's not just us. That's true. My mom is like zooming and all kinds of things. She's 80. So
Mama is zooming, huh? What?
Yeah, she's zooming. She's like, I think I'll go Zoom my friends in Grenada.
What? You see what I'm saying? These kind of things.
It's all blessed. It's a
wild
like time.
It's stuff like this that kind of forces us. Well, it forces us to do a bunch of stuff. Obviously, we'll talk about that. But that's what it is. Sometimes we have to come into the new world kicking and screaming, right, in order to kind of realize what were we so afraid of in the first place, right?
Exactly. No, 100%. And it's funny because our topic is about storytelling, but it's not like a once upon a time kind of story, although that's sometimes the story that's going in our minds. It's the story of COVID. It's the story of how you're going to build that narrative in your mind in regards to where you are and what you can do and what's possible for you. It all stems from here, which I know I'm just singing to the choir right now.
Yeah. I just did something on stories this morning, so I'll tell you in a second. But anyway, welcome everybody. Welcome to Let's Talk with Coach Stone. I got my homegirl LA on here from Cocktales with LA. She's a storyteller. She's an educator. She's a mentor. And I love that you're using the power of storytelling to like break through, to elevate your life, to elevate where you are. And so I completely get it because this morning I was on a call not a call, I was doing some training with 40 young entrepreneurs all about the power of using your story in your business. This was actually part 2.
Yes.
So it was fire. Like, I don't know if any of them are in here right now, but we lit things on fire because they understand, like, don't be afraid to tell your story in your life and in your business because it can just open up so much more for you. So talk a little bit about what you do. Let us know what you do, who you are, and all that stuff.
Wow, that could take up half the show because I don't know what I don't do, Okay, so as we know, my name is LA. LA Wade. I have, I never know how to list all of these things, but I am an educator. I am a story curator for both personal and for organizational company businesses. Because people don't often realize that your brand is also your story brand. And so you can have a personal brand, and that's just how you move through life. But then you can also have a brand that is linked to your entrepreneurial efforts. And there's stories everywhere we look. I mean, and it's really upped my game in terms of my writing, because now I see moment by moment all of the stories that are constantly ebbing and flowing throughout my day. and I can zero in on one part of my day and create a whole narrative around what that is. And it's a great reflective tool in terms of being able to reconstruct a story. People don't think that there's always a plot twist. And when things happen in your life, COVID, plot twist.
Right. True.
I was planning on traveling this year.
I hear you. I hear
Plot
that.
twist. So, how do we interact with the plot twists of our life? That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And then how do you reconstruct that story around these plot twists, around the characters that are in your life, who are the primary characters, who are the antagonists that are stopping you from getting to where you need to go. There's so many aspects of storytelling that are integrated into our lives and how we understand things. And to me, it's just my life is like a walking marketing campaign, because I mean, okay, there you go. Yesterday, for example, crazy ass story. So I've been estranged from my brother because I have 10 siblings. Wow. And 10 siblings, yes, I have 10 siblings. And it's funny because people always say, oh, but they're half brother and sisters. Like, yes, but I grew up with everyone. So it's not like I don't think of it as half, just because my mom was very accepting, always to say it's not children's problems that what adults are doing.
I like that.
So, yeah. So I would never in a million years think about disrespecting any of my siblings just because they didn't come from my mother and father. And in fact, she made sure that I knew my brothers that were younger than me a little bit, because she's like, you guys will have the same narrative. You could fall in love with your brother. And you know my brother, he's from Nova Scotia.
I know. Yeah, I grew up with him.
One of my brothers. So that's not the brother I'm talking about. I'm talking about a different brother who lived in Brampton at the time that I knew him, but his mother didn't want us to interact with one another when my father died. Wow. She was very protective of the will, the stuff that was in the will. And so when that all went down, it's been since 2015 since I last saw him. And he posted a bunch of stuff on Facebook, apparently on Saturday, that was saying that he was wanting to kill himself and that he's going to do it. He's cutting off his phone. This is the story that he's creating. And his godmother, who also knows me, messaged me and said, we got to find him. We got to stop him. And I'm like, I don't know how to reach this kid. Like, I haven't heard from him since 2015. And his mother has damn well made sure that none of the siblings could rally around him and help it. And that's the story. Wow. And I could just accept that story and say, that's it. But instead, you brainstorm. Sometimes when you're trying to construct what the narrative is going to look like, you need to walk away from what you're looking at, refocus to a blank screen, and just start figuring out what it is that you can do to make it better. And so by the end of all of this, I had contacted this person and that person. And at the end of the day, I had an address and I was able to call the police and ask them to do a wellness check. Because if you ever have people that you can't go and see, you can send people. Although after the whole incident with the girl recently, I actually felt a little bit of trepidation.
I can understand why.
The police to his house to help him, thinking, is he going to die? Because I don't know what mental state he's in. And if they're afraid of him, I don't know what could happen. Right. But we live in a society where there's supposed to be, it's built apparently on these rules. Yeah. So maybe we can follow them. And I took a chance because I had to. Otherwise, he could die. Right. He could die anyway, but I'm hoping that the law upholds what it's upholding. So we were able to send him there. And he was fine. He was able to, we talked off the ledge, so to speak. And it was a really powerful moment in nobody expecting, including him, that his saving grace would come from somebody that his mother told him not to speak to.
Wow. I mean, that's a credible story. And I think what it is that that's why you have to share your story, and that's why you have to act on promptings, because it doesn't matter the relationship or not. If you're being called or drawn or pulled to do something, then you just have to act on it, because that's what you're supposed to do at that particular time.
Exactly.
Right? And the fact that you did that, I mean, a lot of people might have been like, I haven't talked to this brother for 5 years. I don't really know him.
Yeah.
I'm out of it. But the fact that you jumped in and really found out where he was and got a wellness check. I mean, that says a lot about you, man. Like,
well, it says a lot about me, but it also says a lot about the way that we approach information that's given to us. And so that comes, and we need to check in and reconstruct those things constantly. And that's what I mean by the stories that are happening real time. This is a story. I was sitting with Danny Stone on IG Live, and we were talking about my brother and blah, blah, blah. Like, these are all stories.
right.
And if we look into them, there are tons of lessons. Like, how did you know enough to, go and start brainstorming ideas to blah, blah, blah? Oh, you want to know that? I can share that with you, because maybe that's something that you can employ in your life to make it better. When you're faced with a situation where the information comes at you in one way, and if your mind is locked in and not open and flexible enough to handle changes, then you get stuck.
Yeah.
But you're never stuck.
Yeah.
It may not be ideal, but you're never stuck. You can always figure out a way.
And I think that's the thing. We're resilient. So when you're in the middle of being stuck, you can't see your way out of it, because you're in panic mode, you're freaking out, or you're feeling, just overwhelmed, or you're feeling like there's no hope. But the minute that you can kind of calm down and step back from the situation,
exactly,
that's when you're like, oh, and it's interesting, because I think that's where it is. We're so, I can't pay this bill today. I broke up with this person. I'm going to get, and then you can't think. And in the minute you're like, okay, let me calm down.
Breathe the breath.
So your resilience kicks in, your problem solving and all that. Do you think that's the case, or what?
Well, I think that it does start with breath. When people tell you to breathe, it's important. So even in telling the story, I wasn't breathing very well, but because I'm anxious, I feel nervous. I don't know why. And so those things are important to know about myself, that when I'm nervous and anxious, I sometimes forget to breathe. So I could say to you, I can then use as my resilience to that situation. I can say, if you notice this about me, can you remind me to breathe? And that's how you can utilize your village to help you, because resilience is often formatted as a way to. Okay, there we go.
I got you.
Every now and then we freeze. I don't know if it's happening. But what I was trying to say is that our resilience is often packaged as something that we do as our own instinct, our own drive. And of course, that is a part of our resilience. But a social worker, I think his name was Michael Ungar. I want to say it, Michael Ungar. He situated resilience from the perspective of our social structures. So if you are connected with your money, if you are aligned with your social networks, there's a village of people that can help you at any given moment, even if it's just one.
Right.
Where two or more are gathered. So when I use that analogy, it's literally to say that if I'm in the company of another person, my opportunity to be resilient is so much stronger, because I can lean upon you. You can lean upon me. And our community now more than ever needs to learn how to lean upon each other. Our resilience is going to come from all of us utilizing our storytelling abilities, because maybe I have a strong storytelling ability. Maybe my sister back there who keeps tripping doesn't, but she can lean on me, and I can give her some examples of how to tell that story in a different way. And it literally frees people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Hold on. Let's see some comments here. Dav Sparrow said, ain't no half ting in African people. Those are your siblings indeed.
Exactly.
My boy Kurt just chimed in here. What's up, Kurt? Real Talk. Good day, people from Real Talk. We got a bunch of people in here. So I like that, relying on other people, right? So what if you don't have people that you can count on? Because sometimes people in your life are very negative, and they're the reasons that you're in this situation that you're in, because of their negativity.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a great example of that. So in talking about who I am and what I do, my story began in one way, and it's completely turned around now. So where my story began is, from as early as 5 years old, I was being inappropriately introduced to sexual abuse, sexual mishappenings in my life as a young girl. And that continued on through most of my life. And yes, it's a terrible thing, but the power of storytelling helps me look back on that situation with all of the things that I've been able to grow through. And much of my resilience came from people I didn't know, because the people I knew were the ones hurting me. Right?
Wow.
So you have to be able to be courageous. You have to believe that you matter enough to ask a stranger. And I often hear this in our community that, you know, we don't go to counseling and we don't do things like that. And it's true. Let me know if I need to close my window because I can hear.
That's okay. I still got you.
Okay. So we often hear that we aren't able to speak to one another. We don't do well with counseling and things like that. And there was a woman who spoke, I think it's Stacy Buchanan. She's a mental health advocate. Okay. She talked about on one of my earlier shows that that she went to a park. She was having a really hard time in her life, and everybody in her family was like, "Oh, just pray the depression away." You can't pray. Okay. I mean, you can pray, but I don't know if that's going to pray the depression away. You know what I mean?
Right.
So she went to a park and literally spoke to a stranger. She just started crying. She didn't know what came over her, which is also out of our character. But we can break down and we have no other course of action, or we think we don't. And that's probably how she felt in that moment. But she turned to that person, and that person said, "You're a good girl. This is what you can consider," because it's from a different storytelling perspective. A complete outsider has a different experience than you have. So you can go into that situation and start to rebuild using tools from somebody else's story.
That's so true.
Movies are powerful.
No, it's so true. And like for you to, I mean, that's something terrible that you had to go through.
It was.
How did you, like, did you seek professional help? Like, how did you get through that?
That is such a great question, because I often do not know how I get to the places. And because I don't know, I know that that's God. My ultimate storyteller is my creator. That's who narrates my life. Yeah. And there's parts of my book that he knows that I don't know. So my faith has been my biggest piece of resiliency in my life. It is the reason why I breathe today, or any day. Same for all of us. But it's in our acknowledgement and in our pausing. Learning to listen is also a very, very powerful tool. And I don't mean just listening to other people, although that's a big part of it, because God will often speak through people. You might be crying out and some random person calls you, or somebody knocks at your door, or, you know, just in time, the right thing happens. Those, for me, are metaphoric examples of how God comes to our aid. In any given moment. And it may not be, you know, the solving of the problem. And a lot of that has to do with us taking responsibility and accountability for some of the things that we contributed to make this happen. Like, and people, it's very controversial, and that's how I am. LA is also a very controversial person. I mean, I talk about cock and stories as for a living right now. Right. I'm talking about love, sex, dating, and relationships, but if you're a small-minded person and you just think of it as that, you will miss the glory of my episodes, because there are always things. The most outrageous interviews that I've done always have this element of, oh, I never thought of it that way. Right. And it's that piece. You want to get to a place when you're doing your storytelling that you say, I didn't think of it that way, or you just added value to me. This conversation, people are watching or will watch, and it's like, oh, she's right, or he's right. Wow, that's a great perspective. That's what storytelling is. You're changing the lens. You're just oscillating to a spiritual lens, a carnal lens. All of them have consequences, right? So as you're going through your choices, which is basically constructing your stories are constructed based on the choices you're making, your living story, then you can start to evaluate. It helps you pinpoint the areas of your life that, when I make that choice, it leads me here most of the time. Maybe I don't like that outcome. I should make a different choice.
Well, I think that's interesting, because, you know, it's about the lens that you wear when you're looking at it, right?
Exactly.
I'm not looking at the things that I did when I was 19 the same way now as I did when I was 19.
Exactly.
And so here's a perfect example of what I think you're saying is that, so I grew up in low income housing, you know, surrounded by drugs and crime. And I was I was really headed down the wrong path. I was in the streets. I was stealing cars, selling drugs, all those types of things, right? Now, and so I always used to say, I grew up poor. I grew up poor. And
That's a
never,
story.
right. I never thought I could own a home because I never had my own room, all of those things, right?
Well, you keep telling yourself.
But here's the thing. It's the lens that I chose to look at it. Yes, I grew up in low-income housing, but guess what? My grandparents immigrated from Jamaica to Nova Scotia, which they were one of the first 5 families in Nova Scotia from the Caribbean.
Wow.
And they bought a duplex. They bought a duplex and they lived in one side and rented it out. So I never realized that, you know, I had family members, my grandparents, who were actually, you know, homeowners and had investment properties. I was always looking at it from the lens of, I grew up in low-income housing and I'll never own a home. So that's the perfect example of later on in life. I'm like, well, wait a minute. I had great examples of that. I used to go to my grandparents' house and help them mow the lawn and do stuff with the neighbors of the duplex that they own. And so I was able to change that lens. And crazy enough, once I did that, my wife and I were able to buy a house. Once I was able to kind of, so that's what I see when you're talking about changing the lens of the story that you're telling yourself.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say. So this is an example. And if all of us do this, actually, we all do this, but we don't always stop and recognize it. And when we are reflecting on it, when we give ourselves time and space and quiet to look and listen and reflect and dream and imagine, these are all tools that you can employ to change your story. You dared to dream that I can buy a house. Wait a second. Why can't I buy a house?
Right.
Even just in the way that you say that, can I buy a house? I can buy a house. I bought a house.
Right.
I'm making money off my house.
Right.
I'm going to go work with my brother and help him buy a house so that I can have some ownership in his house while he starts to build his journey. And then he's going to do the same thing you did.
Right.
That is how this Black Lives Matter movement, we need to think about the story that we are generating. I posted on my feed 2 days ago, I think, was a comedian, Michael Che, who said, you know, Black Lives Matters. And then he says, it doesn't matter more than any other life. It just matters.
Right.
It matters.
Right.
You know, it just matters. And he said, this is the level by which we are engaging the conversation. He said the gay men, the LGBTQ community, women fought for equal rights. We weren't even fighting for equality. We're fighting to matter.
Right. I mean, that's so powerful. Like, it's such a, you know, and I think what happens in life is that we when we're young, we have these big ambitions and these dreams and these goals. Yes. And then we go to school and they start to say color inside the lines. And then you know, all throughout school and all the things that happen in your life, you go from everything is, I can do anything, to like, it gets narrow and narrow. Then when you start working, your job tells you when to be there, how to solve problems. So now all of your dreams are gone and the story is being told for you, right? You're allowing society and other people to tell your story, right?
Exactly.
And we have to get back to dreaming big, telling our own story as individuals, as a Black community, and whatever community you're a part of, because that's what we need to be moving towards. You can't be moving towards mundane, waking up every day, going to a job you don't want to be at, being in a relationship that's all right, being a somewhat decent parent. Like, you can't, that's not the dream, right?
That is not the dream. That is not the dream. In the words of a really smart man named Coach Danny Stone, you've got the keys, now drive.
It's true. You know, I think a lot of us are passengers in life, and we allow our past and the things that have happened and other people's opinions to keep us right here in the driver's seat. Well, you know, because this happened to me when I was younger, because I grew up like this, my dad wasn't around, my mom wasn't great, I got divorced, I broke up with this person, I haven't really seen my kid, I'm just going to stay in the passenger seat and let life happen.
And you start that loop. So every single thing that you experience is revolved through that lens. That's what you're looking at your entire life through. And it's funny that you mentioned that when you were younger, or when we are younger, we can imagine things, we can dream, we can do all of the things that I'm talking about. Well, when I'm doing storytelling, I bring you to those beliefs. What do you believe? Because it starts there. And when you start doing the shoulds, I should do this.
Right.
I'm trying to get there. Well, what's stopping you from getting there?
Right.
You need to know what that is. And they sometimes are the way that you believe. I wrote something down. It's your blind spots, the things that are in your blind spots that everyone else can see. They're like, why? When we're watching a movie and you're like, just tell her. Just tell her. And everyone watching would know that if he just told her, the problems that just ensued afterwards would never have occurred.
And it's also like, maybe you have been in this situation or other people have. You ever been in a relationship with somebody and if someone's like, that's not the right person for you, or everyone
else can see it.
You tell your homegirl, your homeboy, that ain't the right, and they can't see it for themselves. They have to experience it. It doesn't matter how much you say. They got to go through something and have the awakening themselves. Right?
That's right. And so here's my other point to that, because people often talk about having that experience in order to change the story. But if you get into the practice of reflection, the practice of being still, the practice of learning to hear God speaking to you, you won't actually have to experience something bad to change it to something positive. Because he doesn't want that for you.
Right.
Right? He has a purpose for your life. It was predetermined long time ago. You need to walk it out.
Walk it out. I love that. I love it. The love poet said, Black people are the most individualistic people on the planet, both a curse and a blessing, because it's part of what divides us. We're
very individualistic because we learned how to be from our oppressor. That is not our natural state. So that's a storyline that I now reject. Right? It's the way, so you can take in information, and man, these stories of Africa that I've heard and how great the people were, there was a plot twist and it changed the story. And essentially we've all experienced a form of amnesia to who we actually are. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately we are in this Western world imitating who we should be as people in order to adapt and fit where we are living. So we need to change that. We have the power to change that simply by challenging our core beliefs, questioning the societal norms. How does that work? Some of these white people are the most brutal people I have ever seen in history. Like you want to look at history? Let's look at history.
Right?
Let's look at history. This is what has determined their story.
Right.
I don't want that story.
But LA, I think this is what really lets you understand the power of stories, right? Because when Black people weren't allowed to read and write or whatever, you had, white people who are writing our history for us.
Yes.
And people don't understand how powerful that is. Like, think about it. If you think your history starts as you being a slave, everything that comes after that is my history started as me. Now imagine, like, and this is why it's so powerful. Think about this. Think about how many people do that ancestry tracing back.
Yes.
And they do it because they're like, man, maybe I have some royalty in my family, or I'm related to somebody famous. So what does that do? So think about that. As an individual, you're like, I really want to know where I come from. Maybe there's this history of me being associated with royalty or somebody special or somebody doing something great. There's that search. Now, when you take that away from a whole culture of people, then, like, of course that's a race. Now we all think that we started as slaves.
Right.
And then so then now our goals and our dreams and our stories are limited. Well, I don't think I can do more than this. I just want to be a supervisor at the job. I just want to have a house, a little small house, not big, a small house with 2.3 kids. I just want to drive like a kind of a nice car, like maybe a Toyota Camry, right? Because you think
stop talking.
this is what you've been told. Your history started as you as a slave. So you just your ambition is just to do a little bit more than a slave, just a little bit more.
Yeah.
Now,
exactly.
If your history started as a king and a queen, you would be like, shoot, me owning 5 businesses ain't enough. I got to own 10. I have to employ 5 million people because my great-great-grandmother did that when in 1901.
Yes, and we need to employ that way of thinking. And they talk about fake it till you make it. I see it more as an imagining and playing like, dress up in a sense, because that's where our dreams have to begin. We don't have the luxury of knowing part of our history. That some of us will never know. We can know in part, as it says in the Bible, but we may never know the whole picture, right? And so our mythology as a people, I really felt hopeful when hip hop came on the scene, because it was restructuring our stories. And we sold our stories again, as we did in slavery time, to our oppressors. And we, hip hop is what it is. It's still it's still storytelling. It's still dope. They seduce me with the beats, and I'm saying the most outrageous things about myself as a woman. But I'm like, yo,
Right,
this beat is
right,
dope.
exactly.
It's so dangerous.
Yeah.
It's so dangerous. But like, for instance, why do you always hear Jamaican? I'm not Jamaican, by the way, but why do you always hear Jamaicans are such strong-willed people? They are so tenacious. They are this, they are that. They are so wise, because it's built into the mythology of being a Jamaican, right? Being from Trinidad, the people seem to be really great at artistry, using their tactile abilities to create things. Look at Carnival and the magistry of all of these things. You can literally pinpoint people's mythologies within their cultural frameworks. These are stories that tell the whole community who they are. So you can't tell no Jamaican that him not a bad man, because that's how he grew up. He grows up knowing who he is.
Yeah.
Right?
No, that's so true. That's true.
So what are we doing here in Canada? What is the story that Black Canadians know? First of all, they hardly ever acknowledge Nova Scotia, because they think Toronto is the center place for everything Canadian, and exclude a whole story that could empower them right here where they are.
That's right.
There's such a rich Black history storyline that's in Nova Scotia that Nova Scotians share all the time, but it's removed from the experience of people in Toronto because of demographics. It is so inundated with Caribbean people here that becomes our mythology, and then we walk it out in that way. So if I was to have a conference or something, it would be reimagining Black Canadians and drawing from the strength. It's not to negate. It is to bring in the aspects that can be relevant to where we are right now in order to make the significant changes to move us in the direction that we would like to go. We want to go from here to there. How do we do that? That's how most stories begin. I want to get there. How do I get there?
I think you made a great point, even about our own history. Like, I grew up in Nova Scotia, and we never read about, the Underground Railroad or Africville, which was a community.
You didn't learn that in school?
No, not until much later. So all of our history was denied, right?
Right.
And then all of a sudden now we had people outside of the school system saying, look, this is a part of our Canadian history, and we demand that it be taught in schools. Right?
Exactly.
But up until that, we didn't know that there was all of these, amazing Black people who Canadians. We were always looking to America, right?
Right.
And so you're right. Like, you have to learn to define who you are. And like you said, if pieces of those stories are missing, then start from what you know, right? Start from where you are, right?
And think about where you want to go.
Use the resilience and all of the things that you learned from your journey and from your family's journey. Use that. Use it.
Yes. Use it. We've looked so far to the Americans so much that we can't help it. What happens to them there is happening to us, because that is a story that's in our DNA.
Right.
That empathy and compassion for one another, when we know what's happening to another brother or sister, we know what that is. And that's because it's in part built into the narrative of us being enslaved. It's in part built into the narrative that we are, downtrodden, and there's a misfortune. And those aspects are true in some respects. It's not to deny it. It's never to negate. It's to turn the lens to say, in spite of this, look what happens. Right. So when we were first getting this Black Lives Matter movement, man, I couldn't even go online. Every story was just somebody else being killed, all this negative. I'm like, I can't take that in. I can't. Then a beautiful thing happened. People started saying, I'm not doing this anymore. they change the story. They're starting to say, did you know this about Black people? Hey, tag a business. Look at this Black business. We are right now, the most powerful thing in the Black Lives movement is that we're starting to tell a different fucking story.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Hallelujah.
It's true. It's true. We have to evolve. Your story can't be stuck at chapter 1. What's chapter 5 about? What's chapter 10 about? You know what I'm saying?
There's no way that where I was when I turned 1 is where I am right now at 46. There's no way that's the case. You know, I've been through so much stuff. And when we feel, because our feelings also run amok on how we tell stories, right? Because we go with, well, I feel this way. And because you're feeling this way and people say to tap into what you feel, you need to discern the difference between what you're feeling and what God is teaching you. You need to hear the voice of your creator to know which storyline you're supposed to be constructing. Because you can feel one thing and I can win the lottery and 2 seconds later I'm feeling something totally different.
Of course. Oh yeah, definitely.
That's Tony Robbins all day. Like, you can change your state by just, straightening up, putting a smile on your face.
Let's check out some comments here. Amar said, negate SAT word. Archer the Fourth said, spreading love is contagious.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Take it.
So how, like, back to you for a second, how were you able to kind of change that narrative about the things that have happened in your childhood and look at that and then launch your own podcast show with a completely outrageous perspective by some people? So you talked about having this childhood with, this inappropriate things happening as a child. And now you have like this podcast, which is called Cocktales with LA.
That's right.
How were you able to change that narrative? And like, what did people say when you came out with that?
Man, so when they talk about experience is the best teacher, so is adversity. So that's why you can't like fall apart when things aren't going the way you would like them to have gone. So that's what happened. I had a goal, it always starts with, I'm here, I want to get there. And when I get there, I have to start determining, what do I want to feel like? Who's going to be around me? What, set up the plot, the setting, the environment. What is it going to look like when I get there? Then I have to think, what's stopping me from doing that right now? And I start to look at my habits and how I was acting habitually, my choices. When I was in my marriage for 16 years and realizing that the person that I wasn't being seen for some reason. And that's not my ex-husband's fault. That was something that I was doing that was having a consequence in the breakdown of us being connected together. So it's not about blaming people. If you're looking at how to change, and majority of what you're saying has to do with, well, if Danny could change and if I could get more money, those are not belief systems.
Right.
So it wasn't any of those kind of things that was affecting my life. It was something that, although something unfortunate happened to me, it was still coming from me because I took over where the abuser left off. Right? So I had to start looking at that, and it did come from the whisperings, learning how to get quiet. And then after my being in a relationship for 16 years, so think about it, Tinder didn't exist when I was married.
Wow.
It must have emerged somehow in between when I was in those 16 years. So here I am, and people are just hooking up. They're like, you need to sleep with somebody first to find out if you want to be with them. And those were the things that I saw back in the day that said, well, those choices are hurting me. Now I have to choose them again? I'm confused. So I talk about storytelling as a rite of passage of sorts. So there was a theorist by the name of Arnold van Gennep who coined the phrase rites of passage. And there's 3 aspects that he talked about. It was separation, it was liminality, and then there's incorporation. So any change or transformation that you're going through essentially goes through these states. And they're not, and he talked about it as concrete places. I separated from Canada and I moved to California, right? So that happened in my life. But there was a period between going from here to there that was liminal. That's the second phase, where it's disorienting. You don't know where you are. You're not sure if you're making the right choices. You're trying to listen, but you don't know God's voice yet. You're just doing because it's almost like you're trying to grasp for how do you stay alive? How do you survive this thing? And eventually the liminality starts to, if everything is all distorted, eventually it starts to calm down because you're able to check for patterns. And hopefully you haven't done too much damage to yourself in the process, but we also need to learn how to forgive ourselves for what we didn't know.
That's true.
I didn't know. I didn't know I was hurting people. I could see the result of what I was doing, but I didn't understand what I was doing.
Right.
And that has nothing to do with my age. It has to do with my awareness. So I think that's why you can meet 50, 60, 80-year-old people who are damn miserable because they never.
That's true.
Yeah, they don't look at it in a different way. So these are things that I did. And Cocktales with LA emerged when I got separated. And I remember going on these dates for the first time. And then I'd be like telling my girl, because I don't know, I'm asking my girlfriends, is this normal?
Right.
In 2018, I went on it. Not that was the last time I went on a date, but in 2018, I went on a date and we were having a wonderful conversation. Here's the storytelling. Having a wonderful conversation. He's talking about his kids, and I'm just like, wow, why did you never marry the mother? And he said to me, dead ass, what makes you think I'm not married? I was like,
wow.
Did things change that much?
Different out here in these streets, huh? Different out here.
He was like, it's LA, it's 2018. And I have to say, I have never heard more pitches towards polyamory in my life than this time. And I'm like, this must be a thing. I don't know. So this is the liminal stage. I separated from my family and my husband, and I'm definitely in the phase of liminality right now. However, Cocktales became my incorporation phase. Mm-hmm. So I went from separation to what the hell is this dating thing going on here? Who am I? What are they? Where am I? To finally getting incorporated into, I can be anchored to something that helps me stabilize my experience. And the incorporation is that I've transitioned to the expert of my own life. Mm-hmm. I've mastered the ability of telling myself a story, and that I'm not afraid to change the plot. I'm not afraid to introduce new characters. I'm not afraid to create a village for myself. I am the narrator. I am the author of my story. I can put in whatever the hell I want. And if my story means there's unicorns and I believe in unicorns, even as an imaginary friend that helps me do something, that's not my story, by the way. I just made that. But it sounds pretty good, actually. Then that's what I need to do in order to get into incorporation, right?
No, I think that's great. I love it.
Analogy. Sorry, not to cut you. I use this analogy of, I think it's a trapeze. When you swing on the trapeze and the circus, and they have to get to the other one. Yeah. Well, they have to swing with momentum, because if they just swung once, they might miss the next trapeze. And many of us are stuck trying to build momentum, and we're afraid to let go. Mm-hmm. But you have to let go in order to grab the next one. Right. You have to. And it's that moment where we let go, where everybody in the audience is like, are they going to fall? Right. What's going to happen? Right. But most times they hold on. And when they do fall, God has that net to help you so that you know how to do it better the next time.
I think that's important. Like for people like right now who may be stuck in their story, or they're stuck with telling themselves some narrative about, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, nobody loves me. Like, what are some things that they can do to move through that? What would you say to someone who's stuck in that place?
Well, you ever see that movie Inception?
Yeah.
I love that fucking movie, man. That movie is so good because they went through all of this theatrics to plant an idea in someone's mind. You can't tell somebody, change your story, man. Mm-hmm. Be positive. Think well. Yeah. Have big goals. If nobody learned how to do that, they can't just do that out of the thin air. They're not magicians. Although we are kind of black girl magic over here. But, that's not what I mean by that. So what I'm saying is that You have to be able to trust a process of constructing something and listening how to, for me, to try to help you or anyone else that's around me. I have to plant seeds. I need to hold a mirror up because it might be in the blind spot. You know, when you adjust your mirror and you're like, oh shit, I didn't see that car there.
That's right.
It just saved my life.
Right.
That's how we have to be towards one another. We need to hold the mirror up gently so that people can see the blockages that are stopping them, that could kill them if they don't turn and look.
That's so great. Yeah. You know, I see somebody here in the comments, someone's talking about Africville. That's a whole other conversation about Africville.
That could be your
like,
next
we can't
live.
talk about Africville in an hour. If you want to host that conversation about Africville, please do it on your profile. I'll tune in.
I would love to hear about it.
You know, that's definitely a whole other conversation. Thomas said, some of my best moments have come from a good fall, though it didn't seem good at the time.
Never.
I completely understand that. And so one of the things that I kind of ask people to do, and I think if you start your day taking care of yourself and looking in, then it helps you to understand why you're waking up every day.
Right.
And that's why I always ask people, like, what is your morning ritual? Not your morning routine, what's your ritual?
Right.
Not the routine are the things you have to do. You got to get up, you got to shower, you got to brush your teeth. Those things aren't moving your life forward in any way. Your morning ritual are the things that you do to take care of yourself every morning, whether it's gratitude, like a gratitude journal, affirmations, meditation. When you take care of yourself, all of this reflection and slowing things down in the morning when you start your day are going to open up so many things for you. Every day, every week, every month, every year. And if you look at anybody who's highly successful, they all have a morning ritual. They all start their day taking care of themselves first, and then they go about their day and making other decisions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I could point the same question to you because I know you and some gentleman wrote a book called New Me.
That's
and
right.
That's the power of storytelling. So we know it innately, but we don't. If we think of it as an actual template that we can go to, it's a resource, it's a tool in our toolbox. Right. That, you know, when I want to hang a picture, I take out the level, I get the tape, you know, you do all of these different things because you know what it is that you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. So after you know what it is you're trying to do, you have to sit and think about, what do I need to do it? Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah. And I think most people think they have to have a perfect plan. Like if you're I was stuck in a job I didn't want to be in. Instead of crying and complaining with everybody else, you know, all of us would go to lunch together and talk about how the job sucked. And I'm like, I don't want to be in this situation. Right. So I secretly started a side hustle, and then that side hustle wrote this book. And then within 3 to 4 years, it got so big I could leave. And you know what people said to me on that very last day of the job? They said, how come you never told us that you were out here starting your own business, right?
Yes.
Because they love to tell themselves that story about, I hate this job and one day I'm going to leave. And I was secretly working on my plan. Like, there's no perfect plan. You just got to start. You just have to start.
You just have to start. And that's exactly what I did with Cocktales. I just said, there was enough people saying, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of people that have really bad dating stories.
Right.
But is it that they're bad dating stories, or are we choosing the wrong people? Or is there something about us that we're doing that is contributing to having these experiences? And I'm like, these are some crazy cocktails, boy.
Absolutely.
I literally said it like that.
But it's absolutely. So like for you, right? Once you got back into the dating world, so do you think that it was things like mindset and things that you had blockers from before that were holding you back from finding the right person?
Well, you don't know what you don't know. And when the inception of what could possibly be different for my life was planted through like listening to sermons, closely listening to what people were saying and comparing it to what they were doing, sensing what was going on inside of me, listening to asking people, what do you see in me? What do you see for me? you know, but you're listening. You're not taking it in as truth. You're just listening. There's a gathering of information that you need in order to make proper decisions. You don't just go out and say, that house looks good, I'm going to buy it. You have to do your research. And a part of becoming better for yourself requires research because you don't know everything. So you want to get as much feedback as possible.
Well, and I think the other part is you own your happiness, you own your success, and you own your failures. And a lot of people don't want to own it.
They don't.
So you can put it on your past. You can put it on the person that you got divorced from. You can put it on, you know, my job is holding me back. You can put it on where you grew up. You can put it on so many things. But at what point are you going to step up and take the ownership for your life? Like, I think that's what I realized. Once I did that, like, I owned not being a great boyfriend. I owned all of the mistakes that I made.
Right.
I owned it. And then once I started owning it, I was open to
everything,
more amazing things.
I would venture to say that your entire life turned around when 100%. We own it. You know what that was for me? That was my 8 Mile. I'm like, man, if I get really big, people can be like, that girl's a bitch, that girl's a hoe, that girl's this, that girl's that. And I was just like, I did my 8 Mile, I did my Eminem, told my story for myself. Yeah, I used to sleep with a lot of people because I was looking for love. Yeah, I did this. I hurt people because I didn't know myself. Da 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 da. So now what? Now what do you want to say? Right. And not only did I do that, I'm now a new person. And I can choose to be different, and I can choose to do things differently. And if you want to come along with me, I can prove it to you. Yeah, right?
I love it.
I'm on an adventure, and I won't always be perfect. Don't look to me to be perfect, but I will own where I am, and I'll know why, because I reflect. So I'm less likely to make the same mistakes now than I was.
You know what? I love that. And, you know, one of the things that I asked these young entrepreneurs to do was to think about 3 events that have helped to shape their life. And it could be not so great. They can be great or not so. Think of 3 events that made you who you are today. What are those 3 events? What
Storytelling.
Happened? What did you learn? And it's crazy because once you can step back from a situation and you can look at it from a different lens, like, what did I learn?
Right.
You know, then you can see it differently. And then you can pull those things from it and evolve as a person.
Yes, absolutely. This is the way that we make change. And it happens on the micro level, like you and I, but it's just not just you and I. So it's also happening on a macro level. And if there's people within here, then it can be happening on the familial level as well. Micro, macro, meso. These are all of these different stages of our community. And if you're affecting change that happens within you, that what happens within your family and your friends, then it's going to happen in our community. And it's not easy. I'm not trying to say that this is something great. I've been suicidal. I've been depressed. I suffer from anxiety. But the closer I get to my creator in helping me hear what he needs me to do, the further away I am from that negative ideation, that story that was before, because it's not even probably my story. It's my generational story.
Right.
And the enslaved generational story of who I am. And when I talk to other people that don't buy into that, it disrupts that story. And it gives me a little window into the possibility of something else. And to me, that is the most powerful tool we have as access to change our narrative as a people.
And so, yeah, I love that. And so, like, have you ever gone through counseling, whether it's through... Yeah.
I've gone to counseling. I go to counseling. But I don't, the other thing that I do, I guess, that I haven't said is that I kind of said it. I don't go into situations looking anymore. I don't go into situations anymore looking for someone to tell me the truth about myself, because they can't. They're not me. They didn't go through my experiences. Right. My relationship with God tells me who I am. Right. And it will convict me to do things differently because I can't lie to him. I can't, you can't hide, Adam and Eve with the fig leaves. Like, what are you doing? Dred, I see you, Dred.
But I think that's important. I think it's important for people to understand is that you can get these sources of information from all kinds of places.
Yes.
You can get it from God. You can get it from your friends. You can get it from counseling and coaching. You can get it from reading books. Like, information comes to you in so many different ways. And sometimes we're just so focused on one way to get the information that we miss it in other ways, right?
Yeah.
And so be open to receiving information about yourself.
Yes, be open, challenge the story. Like, when you write a story, you don't just write it through and it's perfect. People that are writing books, as you know, you're constantly editing. Yeah. You're allowed to edit the story that you're living. I give you permission. If you didn't think you had it, anyone listening or looking at this, I give you permission to edit your story if it's not leading you where you want it to go.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's the point. See, that is a big piece. When I'm dealing with coaching clients and I'm speaking to people, audiences and stuff, when I say, what does a perfect day look like for you?
Right.
What is it that you really want? Mm-hmm. What does real happiness and success look like?
Yes.
Nobody knows. So if you don't know, how can you create it? And that's where it requires you time. Like, you have to sit and think about, what does a great relationship look like? What does, like, being the boss in my finances look like? What does being an amazing parent look like?
Oh,
like,
I love it.
And seeing it as clear as you possibly can. So when you're waking up every day, this is how you weed out situations and people that aren't for you. You're focused on that. So when you meet people, you're like, is this person going to help me get to where I got? Are they a part of this journey? Or are they blocking me from getting there? Right?
And even if they are blocking you, that's just another opportunity to be like, oh, that's the antagonist. Or as the indigenous culture likes to say, there's a trickster in my life. Right. They're a trickster in storytelling. Right. That's your trickster. All of your adversity and antagonists in your life, in the makeup of your story, those are the people that are teaching you something just as much as the ones that are loving you unconditionally. They're both necessary.
I think that's a good point too, because, I used to manage training for big companies, and I was managing training and coaching people in big organizations, and I was afraid to let people know where I grew up and how I grew up. I didn't want people to know I grew up in low-income housing. I didn't want people to know that I was headed down the wrong path, just steal cars. And so I was terrified to let people know. No. And what happened was, once I opened that part of my story up in the corporate world, people were having breakthroughs for themselves. They were like,
exactly.
Thanks so much for sharing. Man, you've been through that. Wow, this is amazing. So that's the power of sharing your story and getting real with yourself. It's like you form these deep bonds and connections with other people, and then they realize it's okay for me to be flawed. It's okay for me to have a story in the past.
Absolutely. Our ability, I said this the other day, I'm probably not going to say it the right way, how I said it that day, but the essence of what I'm saying is our ability to show up to the truth. How vulnerable are you to really look at the truth of who we are, or who you are, is really going to determine how authentic you come across to someone. And that authenticity will lead to the connection or disconnection of that experience.
Authenticity, that's the word. Mike True said, this is great information. The Love Poet said, loving it.
Awesome.
Steph said, wise words, mama.
Thank you.
Amara said, loving the metaphysical perspective intertwined with faith, talking points, Miss Wade.
Thank you.
So we got about 2 minutes left. What do you want people to know?
I want people to know that I release an episode every Wednesday, and to please go to YouTube and subscribe, because my story needs to be told. I need to show people how to tell stories. I want to be an example for people. So I feel like I've been so alienated and isolated from my mistakes that it's actually going to be a blessing to every single person, because there's so many aspects of my story. I've been so on the hunt for getting there that I didn't realize that I'm already there when I'm here. Anywhere you are is where you are.
Anywhere you are is where you're supposed to be.
Exactly.
I think people have to understand that. Anywhere you are is where you're supposed to be.
And that it's okay to be there, even if it feels bad. And if you really don't like the way it feels, search for the things that soothe you, that give you that breath. Take a breath. I used to hear that and be so effing mad. Like, what are you talking about, Drake? About take a breath. That's not going to help my money situation, Drake. But I'm not realizing that God is a God of order. there is discipline and order that you need to have in your life so that my money situation can be right. I had to learn to breathe.
Yeah.
It sounds funny.
Taking that breath might give you the 2 seconds that you need to see where that money's going
to Exactly. Exactly. And so that is what I want to leave with people.
Awesome.
To follow me, to join me, to book a cocktail with me, share your stories with me. Yes. I will help you extract it. You have so much inside of you that you can share with people. People think that they're insignificant. They're so powerful that they don't even know. And